Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Red River Roundup presented by 446 Sports and the Gridiron Football Group. I'm your host, Marshall Effler. Got Doug Gann with us this morning, made a long trip down to the river parishes last night. We are through 3 games in the regular season, and we're here to recap everything that was brought to you over the Thursday and Friday night part of the season by 446 Sports. We're presented by Gridiron Football Group. Jace Lejeune will be on with us later to talk about the Baton Rouge area, and had several games that took place on Thursday. Again, some of those right here on 446 Sports, and then Friday night was full of action. Really the highlight of the week, whether you're in Sinlaw, whether you follow 446 or really anywhere, I think Ash going down to Destrehan and taking on the Wildcats was a game of the week anywhere. Ash comes out with a 27-21 victory. Menard with a tight 1-point victory over St. Mary's. Tioga with a big win. They are all over Pineville, 56-14, kind of an annual rivalry game there. Grant went up to Union Parish to take on Darbone Woods Thursday night. Timberwolves 49-34 over the Grant Cougars. Buckeyes 3-0, 1-point victory over South Beauregard, 27-26 on Thursday night. And then Turlings Catholic with a huge win, 24-20 over Notre Dame. And that's a school that may be right at the top of that 4A sports writers poll once we get into next week. A couple other Sinlaw scores, Bunkie 53, Avoyelles 6. Bunkie Panthers, at this point, I think you've got to put them in the conversation with anyone in 3A at this point. Division III non-select, they're going to be a contender there later in the year. But as far as 3A schools, what Bunkie has done last year and continues to do this year, again, I think the Panthers are as good as anybody in 3A right now. Marksville 20, Iota 8, Faraday 69, Delta Charter 24. Faraday now into the top 10 polls in Class 2A. Gina 42, St. Fred 6. That was bit of a revenge game for the Giants. They got nipped by the Warriors at St. Fred's last year. Gina, we knew this. They're right there with Bunkie. That's going to be a fantastic district matchup here in a couple weeks between two schools that have really become the class of 3A, especially in the non-select side. Leesville 48, Manny 15. That's a really good win for the Wampus Cats, taking on what was a 2-0 Manny team. And West Washita with a 57-32 win over Winfield. And we've got Doug Gann with us, the voice of the Trojans. And Doug, it seemed like it was a defensive first half down in Destrehan, 7-7 going into the half. Neither team, from what I could see, really could just enforce what they wanted to do on offense. It was really just kind of body blows and holding each other's offense in check. But gosh, Ash's defense looks so big, so talented, and so good, and they showed it last night on the road.
Look, they did, Marshall, and thank you. And it was one of those games of the ages that you expected to go. Ash had got the better of Destrehan last year when they were at Butch Stoker Stadium. Quarterback Jackson Fields was out of the game. He played this one, and you're right. It was just big defensive play after another in that first half, and kind of two big programs filling each other out, and nobody really going after each other. I thought. Now they may look at it completely differently, as it was just the defense that were rising up. But man, that second half was lit up. But if you go to the final, oh gosh, it's the final 2 minutes or so of the first half when Destrehan is marching down. The Trojans stiffen up and hold them out of the end zone because there was a big opportunity at 7-7 that Destrehan was going to go over there and Belichick them, score right before the half, and then Destrehan gets the ball to start the third quarter. Ash gets a big stop in the second, gets a big stop to start the third, and puts up what was 2 consecutive touchdowns to take that 21-7 lead. But I'm telling you, Destrehan, not an ounce of quit in them.
So at this point, of course, a huge story, especially for the casual fan coming into this Trojans fall camp and everything they did over the summer. How do you replace Quick Six JT Lindsey? They did that with not one, but two would have proven to be elite starting level running backs in Noble Williams and Kason Williams. Kason Williams, so far throughout the season, big plays, they've gone to him. Last night, 4 touchdowns, but several of them were right at the goal line. The games that I've watched of Ash this year, sure, Kason is the one that has gotten that 6 points, gotten the touchdown, but Noble Williams doing a ton of work between the tackles, and I think the touchdowns will catch up. Not that it matters for that offense because they just want to score on the Ash side, no matter who it is. But going from last season to where they won all the games they needed to, they had all the offense they needed to, with kind of that workhorse back, obviously a blue chip recruit, JT Lindsey. What has it meant for this offense? What does it look like? And how has this multi-headed rushing attack worked for Ash this year?
So I don't think that you could draw it up any better than it's been executed. We had Noble and Kason on the show. As a matter of fact, Kason was our player of the game, our Sabine State player of the game last week. But if you go back to week 1, Noble had 4 touchdowns in week 1 and wasn't our player of the week. That was a big one. That was when Alex Fontenot catches the 3 touchdowns. But the two-headed monster that's back there, I mean, these guys are both 6 foot tall. They're both 190 pounds, and they both run like lightning. There's no thunder and lightning. This is just pure lightning that's out there, and they can break it away. You know, Kason gets one of its touchdowns after that 80-yard blocked punt or blocked field goal from Carrick Gaines, takes it down to the 2-yard line. And boy, you know it's not disappointing. That's great. But you see a kid get the blocked field goal, take it 80 yards, and down at the 2. And then Kason comes in and finishes it off. The big play on there, Kason takes another swing pass out of the backfield, catches the ball out of the backfield, and goes 50 yards down the sideline in one of those that may very well be our cool play. But Noble grinds those yards. Noble does not stop running, does not stop churning his legs. You hear the term fall forward. That's what he does. And it takes all the pressure. Coach Bachman came into it after the show because he doesn't like to talk about things on the show that he's going to go do. Their focus and their goal was to run the football. And behind that big offensive line that's grown up behind the H-back of Grayson Thibodeau, these guys went out and ran the ball. You're going to see both of these guys as big Power 4 elite signees. They'll both be Division I guys.
Yeah, and I believe both sophomores, if I'm not mistaken. So
that's correct. There's a whole lot of those too. And look, you put the state out on notice. Noble Williams, Kason Williams. Remember those names.
Look, to me, this whole program put the state on notice going down. I mean, how many elite programs have gone into Destrehan and come out with a win and been up multiple scores in the second half? I think Destrehan scored with less than 2 minutes to go and kind of came to, they weren't fighting until literally there was no time left on the clock, whether you argue if there was or wasn't. Let's take a look at this defense because to me, and this is the most casual analysis that you could probably hear, but I've been around that part of the state, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, looked at some of the biggest schools really by enrollment and by program. Getting off the bus, that Ash front 7, you put them in any uniform, it doesn't matter where, that front 7 looks legitimate, elite 5A. Do you agree? And what about that defensive performance last night on the road to hold them to, through 3 quarters, basically 1 touchdown?
Look, you're right on. That analysis is spot on. It's the best defense I've seen at Ash, and I've been covering them. This is year 11, and it's easily the best. And this is a defense that's got 2 guys playing D1 football right now in Jacobin Guillory and Bud Clark. This defense, top to bottom, the first 15 of this defense, I know they only have 11 on the field at one time, but the top 15 of this defense is really solid. You've got Carrick Gaines, who had the interception in the end zone. And look, it's an elite wide receiver that they're going back. Jay Frazier continued to make big plays again. And I put the Southeastern Conference on notice. I said, look, you've got an LSU commit at wide receiver and Ash's DB, who is undersized, is covering them up every single time. It's ball players. But the front seven, you look at Peyton Hobbs, the addition of Bryson Phoenix, an addition of Jaden Bayon, Ethan Richard along the line, Jackson Townsend at tight end. I mean, at middle linebacker or at linebacker. And you don't even talk about Xavier White, who is a monster defensively. The front seven, the back half, it is going to be tough to beat that ball hawking, chaos causing defense that Coach Josh Mercer and that group runs.
So Ash able to get the win at home versus Destrehan in 2024. Went on the road in 2025, and we'll sweep that series. But going into last night or Thursday night, everyone in this district, 2-5A, was undefeated. We mentioned earlier, Pineville took a loss against Tioga last night. Ouachita really with a quality win at Sterlington on Thursday. But other than that, you kind of start to see a couple of those teams go down over the weekend. West Monroe, another huge game against North DeSoto. The Griffins came away with an 11-point victory there. Ruston, a tough game against Longview. They come out 38-35. Neville went to Mississippi, took a loss there. That was a weird game with a lightning delay, but on the scoreboard, it's a 36-7 loss for the Tigers. So start to see, West Monroe with their first loss of the season, Neville with their first loss of the season, Ruston, Ash, Ouachita, all 3-0. Pineville slips to 2-1 as well. So, wouldn't have surprised you if pretty much everyone in this district is 3-0. But gosh, for the Trojans in particular, if you can have a leg up on that district before you start beating each other up, 3-0 is a great spot to be again this year.
It definitely is. And one thing I'll say about that Destrehan too, before we move on and I'll get into that. You remember Destrehan's week 1 opponent, Catholic of Baton Rouge, and they played them to within a field goal. So this Destrehan team is really, really good, and that shows you the level where they're at. But yeah, you go back there. West Monroe's loss was to Evangel, and a lot of people are going to start. It's not the same West Monroe, and I may get in a lot of trouble for that. But I say that because they're getting their identity under their new coach. They're West Monroe until they're not West Monroe anymore, and they're going to come at you. But Pop Houston, the LSU commit, and that Evangel team, this just in, they're really good. Ruston, always going to go up in battle. I mean, that was a field goal at the end that did that. It's just, my goodness, these teams are going to beat each other up. But you're not going to see any of these teams that just play patsies along the way. They're going to go out there and they're going to battle because now it's power ranking points. And so you may take a loss, and a loss may do better than beating somebody by 50. So you got to go out and schedule good people. And I'm going to tell you, those that don't go out and schedule good people, they're not preparing themselves for a trip to the Dome.
Yeah, and this is the time of year where those teams have a chance to do, Neville going one way, Ruston traveling the other. And talking about this with this Ash coaching staff and the fans around the area from a Trojans perspective, this is the stage that you pray to be on, the kind of depth that you have on your offense, the kind of talent that you have on your defense, the kind of expectations where Ash is going to Destrehan and it's a toss-up, in the community. There's every reason to believe that the Trojans can go on the road and get that victory, and they did that. Now, even if they take that loss, you don't necessarily put them down a rung at all. But with Ruston, Neville, West Monroe traveling to Arkansas last week, Ash going all the way down to the river parishes last night, no one in this district is afraid to do anything in their non-district schedule. And again, just like you said, covering Ash, following Ash as long as you have, to have them right literally in the conversation, in the first sentence with the elite teams in this district is a testament to Coach Bachman, testament to the entire Trojan program, the elevation that we've experienced, watching it the past few years. But my goodness, I mean, as much as we've talked about it, it's just going to be an amazing district slate coming up here in a couple weeks.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to duck out of here. We're still trying to make our way to Abilene. We've got LCU and Hardin Simmons coming up on 446 Sports at 1 o'clock. So we invite you to join in that. But look, I'll give you this last little caveat. There were a lot of great games last night. and they're all on our 446 Sports YouTube page. Hop over there, watch some good football before you go watch Pat McAfee do whatever he's going to do on game day. There's a lot of great football that's out there. You guys have a great show. I'm going to duck out, and somehow I'm going to find my way over to Abilene, Texas, and Hardin-Simmons and get there and bring you LCU Wildcat football.
Look, you got to pull out tough wins on the road, just like the Trojans do. We appreciate your time, Doug. Have a good call today, and we'll talk to you soon, sir.
All right, brother. We'll see you.
All right. Thanks to Doug Gann, voice of the Ash Trojans. Again, just a huge road win for them last night to go to 3-0 at Destrehan, and District 2-5A will be a heavyweight bout for the rest of this season. Time now to bring on our friend, correspondent from the North Shore, Mike McMillan of the North Shore Prep Report. And Mike, talking to you through the first couple weeks and even into the preseason about who is the class of the North Shore. Mandeville, in my eyes, 5 seed coming last year into the playoffs, and with big time recruits on their roster. Covington Lions 3-0. Put up over 50 points again last night. You've talked about what that staff has done to that program, but it's early. But gosh, through 3 weeks of the season, it's hard to see how Covington is done as well as they're doing. It's hard to see anybody else kind of being the top dog on the North Shore than the Lions right now.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. You could kind of see that a little bit in the preseason, right? Going to talk to Coach Salter, and he's done this a long time. His family's done it around Covington a long time, so you're not going to get a whole lot of stuff out of him. But you could tell that the light bulb went off a little bit when he's talking about some kids. They started a junior quarterback over a senior. We talked about that last week. That was kind of a battle going into it. Andrew Reynolds, the senior, is a really good one. But Matthew Fussell's really turned it on. He, in week 1, had a really good game in the air. Week 2, runs for over 170 yards. And last night, throws another 3 touchdowns, 150 yards. He's efficient on the ground. They were really efficient all night. They once again, their defense only gives up 6 points. Now, you think about this. I think they gave up a total of 25 yards in week 1 to Bogalusa. Week 2, they beat a very good Franklinton team, which I think has a pretty good chance of getting back, running deep into the playoffs with their quarterback, Jacob Cran. We'll talk about them here in a second. And then they gave up 6 points last night to Booker T. Washington. So there's no doubt that they're one of the best defenses in the area and maybe in the state. They've got 2 linebackers that are fantastic, senior Tamarcus Scott and junior Derek Dunbar, who's a St. Aug transfer. They're fantastic, but they're big up front. Got to give some props out to our big guy, Max Guy. Gets his first interception last night. Max is 5'11", 300 pounds, big power lifter.
There you go.
Gets a ball near the line of scrimmage, gets it in his hands. So it's fun to see him have a little fun there. But yeah, they're kind of rolling on all cylinders, Marshall.
Yeah, a couple other good matchups in the North Shore area last night. Lakeshore, a 4A, 5A matchup. They get the win over North Shore. I've typically have kept my eye on the Titans when I was down in that area. Saw them, make a run in the playoffs a couple seasons ago.
Yeah, definitely.
Where do you see Lakeshore through 3 weeks?
Look, they've done a fantastic job of doing what they do best. They run the ball really well out of the wing tee. Quarterback Brody Loudermilk, he's a junior. He was a running back. They moved him. I think they've still got a little ways to go in the passing game, but they're so dynamic on the ground, with the wing tee. And they've got 3-4 running backs on top of Brody Loudermilk that can run the ball, but they're very efficient. I mean, you ask Coach Indest, they want to score every time they have the ball. And look, give North Shore some credit. Last week they got kind of pounded by John Curtis, which, through 2 weeks, who hasn't yet? John Curtis has got over 1,000 yards rushing in their first 2 weeks. We'll see how they do in week 3. But the interesting thing is that game's like a 14-13 game last night with North Shore trailing. So Lakeshore's defense is really good. I give them a lot of credit for that. They have a huge matchup this week with North Lake Christian. I think that's a fantastic matchup. I think you take North Lake's, early, week 1 loss at Hannon, kind of throw it out the window. They go to Episcopal Baton Rouge last week, get a big win, in kind of a dominating fashion in the fourth quarter. And Episcopal shows they're a good team. They go win a big game last night too by a lot. So that's a really intriguing matchup for next week. But I love Coach Indes and what they do. Like I said, if I could explain them in one sentence, it was they do what they do really well, and they know what they do, and they're consistent at it.
That approach seems to work a lot in high school football for sure. Doing what you do, knowing what your identity is, and bringing it, whether it's home or road. Mandeville got a win last night, a high-scoring game there between Slidell and Warren Easton. Warren Easton takes the victory, but bit of a basketball game broke out there. And Warren Easton's been strong. They've dealt with some forfeitures in the past few seasons, but that's a tough matchup on the field. So Slidell, again, another one of those big schools willing to travel, willing to take on a big challenge in non-district.
Yeah, that game's like, I think it's 42-35 at halftime, Marshall.
Wow.
Yeah, it was insane. So at one point, I think it's 42-42. It's a close game. Slidell was down a touchdown through, I think, the third pick of the night. That Easton returned back inside the 10 and scored a late touchdown. That game's really, really close. And it went exactly like I thought it would go, but not like I wanted it to go. In our game preview, I wrote that Slidell would really need to make some stops, right? Get some stops at some point and get the ball back into their offense. And they gave up 64. So it's hard. It's hard to win a game when you give up 64. I know Coach Page is on that. I'll say this offensively, Marshall, don't be surprised to see these numbers out at Slidell every week if they stay healthy. Ricky Williams, our quarterback, he's a junior. He can run it, but he's slinging it all over the place. Jaquan Jones, a running back. I think he's at 350 yards over the first 2 weeks. We'll see what he had last night. And then receiving weapons, he had another kid step up last night, but Carlos Flemings Jr. and Jeremiah Birdlow, who I'm really high on. He's a UL Lafayette commit. He's 6'4", 235-pound tight end who can run. Offensively, they are going to be a problem. So that's a fun one. They host Mandeville this week in Slidell, which, I don't know how many years I would have said that is a huge game for both teams, but it's a big game for both teams. And to touch on Mandeville last night, their senior quarterback, Ben Hendricks, it sounds like is going to be out for the season. So that's a tough break for them. But they have a freshman quarterback, Crew Crolora. He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. He's a lefty. He's going to be really good. He's
had some good games already. Yeah,
he has. And then last night he threw for over 200 yards again, a few touchdowns. He's dynamic. I think, Coach Jones does a really good job over there, but we'll see how they kind of adjust the offense. But honestly, I think they might be in a better position throwing the ball now with the young freshmen than they were running a lot of RPO stuff with Ben Hendricks. So, and I've got to give Jax O'Quinn some credit. He hadn't had much success rushing over the first 2 weeks. He took over for Nate Shepard last year, but had a big game last night running the ball, which only helped the freshman a lot. So, but that's a big one next week at Slidell for sure.
St. Paul's got a win last night. So did Franklinton, you mentioned, last year's 1 seed. I know, North Shore Prep Report cover District 7 5A, District 6 5A, District 7 4A, and District 9 2A. Kentwood, I believe, got their first win of the season last night. Jewel Sumner. Yeah, and Jewel Sumner, I believe, might be 3-0 or at the very least 2-1. So
they are. They're 3-0 after beating Laranja last night, which was
off to a good start.
Mm-hmm.
Looking into, as we kind of get into some of these district matchups, for some areas of the state, they'll get in it next week and won't stop till week 9 or 10. So going into some of these districts on the North Shore in your area, several 3-0 teams, a lot of 2-1 teams as far as teams that we would look at as contenders in some of these districts. What are you looking forward to, and kind of what's your early outlook on some of those district competitions?
Well, looking at District 6 5A first, Covington is off to a fantastic start. St. Paul's gets a bounce back. They had a rough one last week against Brother Martin, but Easton Royal almost single-handedly beat them. I mean, he's going to do that all year to teams. So I throw that tape out the window. You're not going to match up outside with that guy. So they get a big win over De La Salle last night, 24-7. Cody Corrales, I think, runs for over 100 yards again, averaging 10 yards a carry. So he's probably up to, 400 yards on the season at 10 yards a pop. So he's toting it really well. Mandeville, it was probably, a favorite with Covington and St. Paul's. We'll see how they play over the next couple of weeks. I'm not ready to say, hey, they're ready to go compete in that district with a freshman quarterback. Most coaches will tell you, what I would always say is for every sophomore I've got to put on the field in 5A, that's a loss for me, right? So I don't know what the rule is for a freshman quarterback, but it can't be good, right? But he's talented. I think he's going to continue to grow, and they're going to do what they need to do around him. And then look, I don't want to leave Hammond out the mix. Hammond has a week 1 loss, but they come back last week. They shut down a meet.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, they win that game 10-3, and then they go to East St. John last night. And look, East St. John's had a tough schedule. I mean, they opened with St. James, week 2 with St. Aug, and then they get a Hammond team after a win. Hammond's got a quarterback, Taryn Jones. He's a junior. It's really good. They've got a fantastic running back. They've got some playmakers, but defensively, like when they get off the bus, you know who they are. There's a defensive end linebacker. I think I brought him up last week, Alante Beauchamp. He's 6'3", 220. His arms go to his knees. He had 3 sacks last week. We'll see what he did last night, but Hammond's fantastic. I'm really excited about them. District 7 5A, Marshall. Gosh, dog. I thought, and I'm going to touch on 7 4A here, which I think is one of the best districts around. But Chalmette goes to Holy Cross and loses last night. They only muster up 6 points. I was a little disappointed by that because I think they're fantastic. They're talented. Coach Tucker's going to do a great job. They're going to be right back in it. So no stress there. They lose a real big rivalry game. Salmon, who I think is a front runner there with Chalmette, they go get their first win last night. So they're 1-2. They go to Bogalusa and get that win. Wow. They are dynamic on offense. They will remind you of Slidell a lot. Those teams mirror each other. I can't wait for those teams to play later this year. It might be 80-80 at some point with some fantastic scoring. So that'll be good. And then Fountain Blue. Fountain Blue is now 2-1. I don't know when the last time they've been 2-1, but they get a big win over Peabody last night. North Shore, they're struggling a little bit, but they're going to be fine. Coach Sanders has some talent there. And then lastly, Slidell in that district. It's an absolutely fantastic district that it's better than I anticipated. Now, District 7 4A, Laranja loses last night to a really good Sumner team. Sumner might end up number 2 in the rankings here when they come out Monday for 3A. So no big, huge loss for Laranja there. They're going to be fine. Hannon, they're 1-1 going to Catholic Point Coop last night. It's 35-36. They score to go down 1 and go for 2 and don't get it. And that's how the game ends. So look, give Coach Soper and those guys some credit. He's in position every week to win games now, which wasn't the case before. With any team that's like that, I think they have to learn how to win, right? Like those wins will come, but they have to learn from it. And they're going to be fine. Their problem is they're going to step in the district play soon, right? And it's Laranja, Lakeshore, Franklinton, and Pearl River. Lakeshore wins last night. They're 3-0. And then Franklinton, Franklinton plays Pine last night. If you haven't seen Pine play, I'm always high on Pine. Yeah. Just because the style they play, they have a phenomenal coach. But Franklinton wins. So Franklinton sits at 2-1 like they did last year after a Covington loss, and they ran the table and ended up losing to Cecilia in the Dome. So it's a big one. 9-2A, I think, really that's going to come down to North Lake Christian and Pope John Paul. Pope loses on the road at Riverdale last night, but that's now a 3-0 Riverdale team. So, hey, wake up the Riverdale fans, right? It's 3-0 at Riverdale. That's a big thing. And then some other ones around, and I know we're running short on time here, but St. Charles gets a huge win over Dunham. I don't know if you guys covered that, but St. Charles
Yeah.
Catholic, 28-21. They hold Elijah Haven to 21 points in that group, so that's phenomenal. Rummel gets another one over Shaw. I think Shaw's 0-3, but they've played a gauntlet early on. They'll be fine. I have to give a shout out to Coach BJ Young and South Lafourche. They beat Central Lafourche last night, big rivalry game that puts them at 2-1. That's a big one for them. Obviously, you guys probably covered Alexandria and Destrehan. Destrehan, my alma mater. They're 1-2 and they've lost to Catholic and Alexandria.
Yeah.
They're going to be okay. So they're about to get into district play, and it's I won't say it's a down district for them, but it's much less competition than they played the first 3 weeks. And then Hahnville gets a big one over Edie White last night. Edie White's another one that's sitting on the losing side of the record.
Right. Yeah.
They'll be there. They'll be there at the end. They've scheduled some big boys. They weren't afraid to do it. And, I think they lost a close one to Jesuit. They lose to Hahnville. So nothing to be ashamed of there. They're going to be fine once they get into district play. But next week, Marshall, Mandeville at Slidell. That's a big one. Franklinton is at Fontainebleau. We'll see what Fontainebleau is now, right? Can they defend the pass and Jacob Crane and those guys? And then Lakeshore's at North Lake Christian. So those are 3 really big North Shore games that are happening next week.
Mike McMillan with the North Shore Prep Report. Mike, thank you so much for your time as always. We'll talk next week. Enjoy the Saturday, sir.
Y'all be safe, my man.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to Mike, North Shore Prep Report. Got a good roundup of everything happening down there. And now, moving right along, we'll bring on our buddy, Chasten Javars from the Lake Charles, Southwest Louisiana area. And Chasten, I know you had Hamilton Christian and Vinton. Hamilton Christian 3-0. You've talked about them pretty much since Jamboree week, but really a great win there to go up 3-0 in the non-district season.
Yeah, look, it was the only 2-0 matchup in our area this week, and kind of what we expected going into this matchup. The biggest question was going to be for Vinton. Last year they were able to hold Javon Vital under 150 total yards. They only, Hamilton only scored 13 points. So really, that defensive front was able to find a way to contain Javon Vital as much as possible. Not the case this year. Vinton lost a lot on that defensive front. They were also without a couple of guys last night. And look, it was from the opening jump. Before Vinton even went on offense, it was 14-0. Hamilton starts the game with the football. They drive right down the field. And then ensuing kickoff, they kick it into a dead spot. Vinton doesn't jump on the football. Hamilton gets it. And just like that, 2 plays later, it's already a 2-touchdown game. Hamilton, already up before Vinton touches the football by 2 touchdowns. So it was a lot of that. It was, I believe, 34-0 at halftime. Vinton was able. I like the fight I saw from Vinton late in that football game. They started to figure some things out. They hit on the longest pass they've hit on all year. They don't really throw the football a whole lot. They're going to run that veer. We saw some things from Jaden Briggs. He got a really long touchdown run. But look, Javon Vital, if you ever get a chance to watch him, go do it, because that kid is special. There were countless times in last night's football game where a play is never done with him. And that's why he plays quarterback, because he's just a freak athlete and can make anything happen. There are multiple times where he reversed field 3-4 times in one play, was 25 yards behind the line of scrimmage. There was one time where he had reversed field 3 or 4 different times, had Vinton, multiple guys in the backfield trying to get him, and then he just heaves a ball downfield 65 yards, and it's caught to set it, and it ended up setting him up with like 15 seconds before the end of the first half for them to score. He is pretty spectacular, and they got a big matchup next week with St. John. They're gonna be taking on St. John, who they defeated by 11 points in the first round of the playoffs last year.
You picked Manny over Leesville. My heart wanted to pick Manny, and I wasn't really sure what Leesville was going to be able to do in that matchup. But really, credit to the Wampus Cats. But for Manny, that's another quality week for them at 2-1.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at my pick'ems because they do not look good.
I always look at your pick'ems.
I think I'm down to like 55% now on my winning position. I had 4 losses this week. But look, I think everybody picked Manny on there because judging by the first 2 weeks, you're looking okay. They gotta win over Logansport. They dominated DeRidder. Now DeRidder's down a couple of guys now, and Leesville had struggled. Leesville woke up last night, and not gonna lie, when I looked down and saw 21-0, I got a text message that Leesville 21, Manny nothing, and I went, wow, that shocked me. Just because Leesville hadn't been able to do much on the offensive side of the football,
Right.
they haven't really been able to stop anybody. But Coach Causey's always going to figure it out, and he was able to do that last night. And look, that sets up. That's a nice win for Leesville because Manny's going to go on to win a couple of more games. And you mentioned it. I mean, Manny's been right there in every single game they've played this week or this year.
Two teams that have kind of flexed their muscles a little bit through the first 3 weeks. First off, the Blazers and Lake Charles College Prep, they get another win last night. I believe that was over Opelousas, who's been in the Superdome recently. Also, Barb Bucks off to a strong start. Their non-district schedule is never easy, but both of those two teams with winning records here at the quarter pole.
Yeah, look, they Lake Charles College Prep in particular, they have been in all 3 games. They probably would tell you they feel like they should have won that week 1 matchup when they played Westgate, and they had 5 turnovers in that football game. They lost by a touchdown. They needed the win last week versus Barb, and like I said last week, they were able to come from behind, down 25, get the win 70-65. And then last night, it was back and forth affair with Opelousas. We were watching that one while we were doing our game. They ended up getting up 2 scores at one point. Opelousas ends up coming back, and then Opelousas with 30 seconds says the ball second down and 10 or second down and 8 or something at the 12-yard line, I think, trying to go in to score and tie the football game, maybe even try and win it. And Opelousas calls a timeout, and the first play out of the timeout, an interception to seal the game for Lake Charles College Prep on the goal line to get the win. So they're 2-1. The other hand for Barb, look, they were able to get a much-needed win over Northwest. They went into that matchup 0-2, and dropping a game to Airline, a game to Lake Charles College Prep, and then they go into that matchup with Northwest, who that was a battle of two teams who were trying to avoid going 0-3, which is pretty crazy to think about. That was I believe that was a 20-19 game or a 21-20 game right there at. Right there in the third quarter, Northwest loses its quarterback, and Barb, kind of runs away with it late. But that was a heck of a football game for 3 quarters, and Barb gets a much needed win because they're going to start district play next week with Karen Crow.
Believe looking down at Division III, Division IV, both Welsh and Kinder got wins over the weekend. Kinder with a big win Thursday night, 52-0 over Rose Pine. You see either of those teams kind of where they are used to being in those Division III, Division IV brackets.
Jennings actually got the win last night over Welsh 26.
Oh, did they? Look, I'm glad you're here. Yeah,
26-14. I picked Welsh. I was the only one going out on the limb to pick the.
I won't tell anybody.
Jennings got the win last night, 26-14, and that was a big. Jennings needed that win. Now they've won 2 in a row. They squeaked by Eunice last week after getting their doors blown off by Iowa in week 1. They're going to be an interesting team to watch. They need to pick up a couple of wins. I think they'll be able to pick up a couple. Should be able to, when district rolls around. Kinder, look, there's 3 teams, and I'm going to get nasty text messages from coaches. I've already said this about 2 of them. I'm going to get nasty text messages from coaches. There's 3 teams in this area that I think have a really good shot to go undefeated, and which is crazy because you don't really see that a whole ton. That's Hamilton Christian. Their lone real test is Grand Lake on that schedule. The district's not great. Elton maybe. St. John obviously next week as well. Kinder, they're in that up north district with Oakdale and Menard and so on. That's another team that they play their cards right. They've got some things to figure out on the defensive side of the football. Obviously, getting the win over my Rose Pine Eagles on Thursday night. They've got some things to figure out defensively, but they could be another team that, not many losses on that schedule. And then the power here in Southwest Louisiana that has become is Iowa. I mean, that district's going to get, interesting. Washington Marion has been better. We still don't know about Leesville yet. Obviously, they get that win over Manny, but those are the three teams in this area that really have a nice shot to win a lot of football games this year.
And was Iowa off this week? Was that a bye week for them, or
no? They got they got the win over Parkview Baptist. They were up 30-0 in the first quarter.
Glad I checked. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, and look, I mean, district for a lot of those teams, that's it. If that's the one you're in, and you've got a matchup advantage, then really it's only to your benefit to run through that district, dominate, get that extra PowerPoint. And kind of like I said earlier, flex your muscles a little bit. Barb, you mentioned 1 and 2, but quality losses is a dangerous term, especially in some film rooms. But really, just impressive showing against tough competition. So you see a lot of 6 and 4, sometimes even 5 and 5. Teams that are going to get those high seeds in the playoffs because of the type of schedule that Barb takes on early on before they get into obviously a district that's no slouch any week.
Yeah, Barb's thing is they just got to figure it out defensively. I mean, they're trying right now to outscore people. Obviously, that's how the game was against Northwest. Defense played a little bit better, but obviously giving up 65 points or 70 points the week before not going to help your average very much.
Well, you've got a couple 3-0 teams in the area, got a couple others that have really snuck in some basketball games there in the box score here during football season. So anything that you're looking at next week in particular is, like I said, district kind of starts to open up here.
Yeah, you mentioned Barb and Carencro will play Sam Houston Sulphur, another matchup. I don't have the schedule right here in front of me. We're going to be at Westlake DeRitter next week, which I don't think I've even put out yet, so you get the exclusive. Westlake DeRitter is going to be our matchup, which I'm excited about. Which, by the way, shout out DeRitter. They're I saw somebody told me that they are going to be. I saw online that they are going to be. They're moving their graduation this upcoming spring because they're going to be installing turf there at Cecil Dewey Memorial Stadium.
Oh, wow.
So good stuff there for the Dragons. But yeah, starting to get into some district play, so should be a lot of fun next week. We're really getting rolling now.
Well, enjoy some college football today, Chasten. We appreciate your time as always. We'll talk to you next week, sir.
Yep, there it is. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, sir. All right, I want to appreciate Chasten Tavares. He does a great job covering sports, high school, college, everything down there in Southwest Louisiana. And we've got, several of those districts that'll start next week. There's a few more non-district matchups that will take place next week, but always an interesting time to see kind of how you match up with your peers. That's can usually have a lot of implications into playoff seeding when it comes that time. A few other scores that I want to get to around the state before we get to Jace Lejeune. We mentioned Ouachita with a 10-point win over Sterlington. That was a really close game, had a pick six at the end, but that was basically a one-possession game. Evangel 43-36 over Byrd. Might ask Jace about Pop Houston here in a minute. North DeSoto, we mentioned 39-28 over West Monroe. Calvary, that's a big win against Franklin Parish. Franklin Parish coming in was the number one ranked team in 4A. So Calvary with a win there, and that was a good back and forth game. The 117th playing of the Claiborne Parish Super Bowl, Haynesville and Homer. The Haynesville Golden Tornado get a 54-6 win. That game was at Homer. And then kind of a surprising game, Oak Grove up in West Carroll, they get a 6-point win over Red River, but they were down in the second half of that game. A little bit unexpected, but Tigers get the win there. So a couple big matchups in non-district week 3 from around the state that kind of caught my eye. And like I mentioned, a lot of these schools will be jumping right into district play next week. So we'll see how those non-district matchups help with everything, with preparation for the latter part of the season and also those ever important PowerPoints. And now we're going to bring on our buddy Jace Lejeune from Gridiron Football in the Baton Rouge area. And Jace, I know a couple of basketball games broke out in your area last night. I don't know if it was the three-pointer or the full court press or kind of a 2-3 zone that went into it. But I think Episcopal was able to make it into the end zone a few times.
Just a couple, Marshall. I mean, just if you went with the under that game, I apologize to you, but
it was over by the first water break.
Right, exactly. I know Country Day has a really good passing attack, a lot of weapons there offensively. So, yeah, it was just one of those games that Episcopal's offense hasn't really been the problem this season. It's just you have to replace – and, I know this Episcopal team quite a lot just because calling their games each and every week. But the offense, you have some weapons. Zach Q is in his third year as the starting quarterback for the Knights. Taj Callahan, who's one of the guys we invited to play in our Gridiron Football All-American Bowl game at the end of the year. He's got a couple of Division I offers. He's the running back. He's got great talent. He moves from defense to offense, but that's been kind of the problem this year. This is a major overhaul on defense. You lose every single starter from last year on defense. So that is tough for a 2A football team to overcome. But you play two tough teams to start the season. You play St. Michael, who's undefeated right now, 3-0, and then you play North Christian, who Mike talked about earlier on the show, and they got a great running back in Cam Casnave, who's a bell cow, and try a load to bring down. So those are two tough games to start off with. You kind of needed this game because this schedule is pretty tough for the Knights. You got Dunham on the schedule, Ascension Catholic on the schedule. Slaughter Charter is going to be really good this year. East Feliciana defeated Kentwood to start the season. So you definitely need to get that win to feel good about yourself. So it was a good bounce back win there for Travis Bourgeois and the Knights.
A really good matchup, kind of a 3A, 5A look there between Catholic and U-High last night. I'm not sure where that game was played, but 28-14. Okay, 28-14 Bears over the Cubs. Probably a good showing, perhaps in your opinion, for the Cubs, who were really right at the top of their division last year until things kind of went a little sideways for the program. But Catholic, no shot that they're able to get a 2-touchdown win there. But for U-High, where do they go from here, and what do they take from that game last night?
Yeah, Marshall, that was actually the game I was at last night. I think pretty much everybody in Baton Rouge was at that game anytime you get Catholic and U-High, which, in my opinion, there is a lot of people at the whole city of Baton Rouge at Catholic U-High. In my opinion, I think that game should always be played at a bigger venue, bigger stadium like Memorial, just because it's just a lot of people to hold. But besides the point, but I was at that game last night. If you actually look at the box score, you thought, okay, U-High, hung in there, and they did. But really, the scoreboard only tells like half the story. Really, Catholic dominated this football game, and the game was actually worse than what the score really indicated. Catholic started off the game with prime scoring position, turn the ball over on downs the first two drives, and they jumped out to a 28-0 lead. So it could have been 42-0 if it wasn't for the two turnover on downs in the first two drives. And the two touchdowns U-High did score were the last two drives of the football game. But Catholic pretty much led majority 28-0 for majority of that game. So
something you would have expected, or was that a little surprising?
I mean, I saw U-High play against Woodlawn to start the season in week 1. U-High still a really good football team. I mean, obviously you have Lamar Brown, you have a really good running back tandem there in Sage Ingram and Corbin Odell. Lawson Dixon's a great player. But right now, I think you're just trying to, finesse the passing game a little bit, trying to get the passing game going. They can run the football, and I think Catholic really zoned on that. Hey, we're going to stop the run. We're going to make sure, if you're going to beat us, if you're going to beat Blaine Bradford in the secondary for Catholic High, you're going to have to throw on this. And I think Catholic had a great game plan there to stop the passing game, and that played dividends. Catholic's defense was stifling the entire game until the very end. Ethan McGlynn was able to throw a couple touchdowns to a tight end, Charlie Pettit, to pull within 2 touchdowns. But Catholic was pretty much in control. Defensively, I thought U-High did a good job of hanging in there because Catholic did a lot up tempo during that football game to try to throw off U-High. But U-High starts off the season 1-2, and I'm sure Coach Morin, thought the game was a little sloppy with Woodlawn. So, this is something that's not uncharted territory for U-High. They started off kind of slow last year, if you remember that. They lost to Rummel. They had that 3-0 game against Woodlawn. Yeah. So, this is not really unfamiliar territory for U-High. So they're going to bounce back for sure. And then you talk about Catholic. Talk about the resume already. You go and beat Destrehan, and then you go beat St. Thomas More, and now you beat U-High. And they got Western Merritt on deck. So, of course, they got on the schedule, like an SEC schedule. Still big win. Remember, Catholic lost to U-High the last 2 years. So this was a big win for Catholic just to get revenge over the Cubs. But to be honest with you, the game was totally dominated by Catholic, and the scoreboard doesn't really tell the full story.
I've been interested in the Southside Sharks as they've kind of, first year with a new stadium. Jess Curtis, got plenty of trophies in his office already. They take on Madison Prep last night, get a 13-point win, 35-22. I know you've covered Madison Prep a lot, but I am curious where you see Southside, with this kind of iteration of this program under Coach Curtis.
Yeah, anytime you hire a guy that's had so much success at Manny, winning state championships, winning 2 state championships for Manny, and him coming over. Remember, that was kind of like the talking point last year. What were the 2 big coaching hires? Jess Curtis going to Southside and Robert Valdez going to St. Aug. I think those were like 2 huge moves that you can make to help, get your program that's always been, Southside and St. Aug as of late, teams that are kind of like on that verge. They're sleeping giants. Like, if they get it right, like, they're going to be dangerous and tough to beat. And so when Jess Curtis was able to get the job at Southside, you knew that Southside is going to be really dangerous. Like you mentioned, a new stadium being built and everything over there in Youngsville. It's definitely an up-and-coming community as well, growing community. So they're dangerous with Coach Curtis. I know they lost the start of the season against Notre Dame, but the bounce back against Madison Prep, who Landry Williams got himself a squad, this year. We talked to Coach Williams on their post-game show on week 1. And they're coming off like he likes to schedule 5A teams. You start off against Dutchtown and Madison Prep, able to get a win there. They played, they played the Skippers, Mandeville. So they played Mandeville in week 2, and they got a win there. So that's 2 wins over 5A teams. And now you got to play Southside too. So even though they lost, you're 2-1 against 5A teams. So Madison Prep's going to be really good this year. Remember, they were just a play or 2 short of going to the state championship and being
right.
Shaw. So they got a lot of really good talent on that football team. I know the new quarterback, but it's the quarterback's brother, and he's really good in Landon Johnson. And then they got some really good receivers, Keon Robinson. They're really good offensively. This Madison Prep football team, there's not a lot of teams, especially in their division, especially when it comes to the playoffs, that can compete with them on a talent standpoint. So 2-1 against 5A competition. I'm sure Coach Landry Williams is going to take that.
You mentioned quarterbacks, and there's 2 that I want to ask you about. One that you've covered a little bit, and one that you may be covering here in the future. Elijah Haven at Dunham, that was a really good game between, I believe, St. Charles and Dunham. That was a 1-possession game. Yeah, St. Charles Catholic comes out 27-21 over Dunham. But I do believe that Elijah Haven, again, last night got to put some more good film on tape. Another QB that I want to ask you about, because I've seen him in person on more than one occasion, the recent LSU Tiger commit from this past week, Peyton Houston. I'm a former coach, and the term we have for guys like that is can't do nothing with them.
Mhm.
Watching just a very different game than Haven, a very different approach from the pocket. Houston just, as mobile as he needs to be in the sense that the ends are not going to be able to contain him. He can spin out, roll out quickly, but typically looking down the field and a really strong, quick release. Haven, on the other hand, big, tall, powerful, kind of uses his speed and uses athleticism, just to kind of dominate competition. But your thoughts on the Dunham game and how Haven has looked so far this season, and also what you think, if you don't mind, where you think Pop Houston fits in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, absolutely, Marshall. I mean, that 2027 quarterback class, as everybody knows, it's loaded. I mean, from top to bottom, there's a lot of great quarterbacks. In other years would be number one, number two. But of course, you get two guys like that really stealing the headlines. But yeah, I mean, we actually had Coach Stein on our show last night after the win. And I don't know what it is about St. Charles Catholic, but they just have a game plan and they have a formula when they play against, these generational, highly talented quarterbacks. Remember, like they would play Newman every year with Arch Manning, and they would have Arch's number against Newman, and kind of the same thing with Elijah Haven. Actually, St. Charles Catholic won by getting 2 late interceptions off of Haven. So they do a great job. Wayne Stein does an awesome job with this program at St. Charles Catholic. I know everybody was talking about last year and being an injury kind of plagued year, but when they're healthy, they're ready. I mean, they're a state championship team and they're a state championship caliber program. So that was a huge win for St. Charles Catholic. But besides that, I mean, Haven's had a phenomenal year. I mean, last week he scored 8 touchdowns, something crazy like that. He's having a great start to the season. And St. Charles Catholic is just a well-coached team. It put a lot of stress when you defensively, like to every inch of the field. They put a lot of stress on you. And so they try to mix a couple of things, talking to Coach Stein, and try to give Elijah Haven different looks, what you want. You want to challenge him. But Haven is I've covered him since his freshman year, and he's just special. I mean, just all the way around. Like you said, 2 different playing styles there with him and Pop, as he's like 6'4", 6'3", and Pop Houston, maybe 5'11",
5'11", yeah,
right. So different playing styles there, but yeah, Elijah's really special. He's definitely got a lot of upside, strong arm. He can run the football too. Not as quick and twitchy, kind of like Pop, but just a long strider, big physical runner. Got some speed there. Got some good touch on the football. He's very special. At the quarterback position, there's not a lot of quarterbacks like him. And then we talk
it'll be a few years for these guys, for these 2027 guys. But what do you think overall about that commitment, Houston, to LSU? Kind of where you think he fits, and really how that might affect the recruiting outlook for LSU for the next season or two.
Yeah, it makes things a lot interesting because covering the Tigers, everybody's kind of looking at the future at the quarterback position for LSU. What is that going to look like when Garrett Nussmeier leaves? So everybody's kind of looking at that, especially when you're able to kind of show just the last couple of years that, hey, like this could be a quarterback factory at LSU. I mean, you had Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, Garrett Nussmeier's, in position to be a first-round pick. And now you're kind of looking at the future. Okay, what's ahead? Because you have a transfer quarterback and Michael Van Buren from Mississippi State. You got Colin Hurley, and then who you got coming up. And so that commitment from Pop Houston, he's going to be in the mix. I thought that's going to be an interesting fit in his LSU offense with Joe Sloan, but Coach Sloan really likes Pop Houston. Obviously, kind of a different style quarterback than what LSU has really had. In terms of Pop reminds me a lot of like Kyler Murray, just kind of like 5 and 5.
I've compared him to Robert Griffin at Baylor, just kind of that, just moves when he needs to.
Right. But he can throw the football. Obviously, he put up so many impressive numbers there. So many impressive numbers there, and that eventual offense, and including what he did last year against Captain Tree, even a loss, like 800 yards passing and 10 touchdowns. But he's fun to watch. But that's that type of quarterback that there is nowadays in college football and the NFL, and guys that can extend plays with their legs, and when plays are broken down, and can throw the football. Has great touch, good arm. So yeah, Pop Houston's really, really special player there. For sure. And the Tigers, I think, got himself a great one now recruiting wise, because the 2027 class is so great. Obviously, Garrett has a little brother in Colton Nussmeier.
Colton,
so
yeah.
He's going to be in the mix there as well in that recruiting class. I'm not sure you get two quarterbacks from both in state. I mean, I think that's kind of a stretch to get both Haven and Houston, but I do expect them to still try to maybe get two quarterbacks in this cycle. And that's in 2027.
That's particularly why I wanted to ask you. Number one, just because I've gotten to watch Houston in person a couple times, and also, with the options that he had, to me that was an interesting headline to see that he committed to LSU. You mentioned his relationship with Joe Sloan had a lot to do with it. But as much as we love high school football, big reason is because of what those guys can do at the next level. So appreciate your insight in there. I don't know how you do it all. There's so many good teams, good programs in the Baton Rouge area, but somehow you get it done. Gridiron football. Appreciate the work that you do, Jace. Enjoy the Saturday, and we will talk to you soon, sir.
Absolutely, Marshall. Always a pleasure. I appreciate you and Doug for having me on, and always look forward to talking to y'all guys every single Saturday. So it's been really fun.
Yep. Keep it rolling in the regular season. Thank you, sir.
All right, absolutely. Y'all have a good one.
Yep. I want to thank Jace again, and also Chasten and Mike as well. They do a good job coming on here and making me sound intelligent, quite frankly. Before we go, I have just a head turner of the week, something that has caught my eye this week or through the season. Didn't have a chance to ask anyone about this, but through 3 weeks, Belle Chase has a 61-0 victory, a 70-0 victory, and last night a 56-0 victory. What? That's an amazing first 3 games for Belle Chase. I believe they produced a Mr. Football, Louisiana Mr. Football before Blake Mathern back a couple years back. But that's almost a 200-0 point differential through 3 weeks. So that's my head turner of the week. And through 3 weeks, we've had a lot of good football played. A lot of these recruits, like you mentioned with Jace, like we talked with him, starting to shine, starting to live up to that hype. And a lot of these big matchups have absolutely lived up to the hype. We'll keep an eye here in the Sinlaw area. We'll continue to keep an eye on the Ash Trojans as they try to march back to the Dome. Gina and Bunky doing their thing here in Sinlaw. And a lot of other, really some surprising 3-0 teams all over the state. So we'll keep an eye on everything as we move next week into district play for a lot of teams. But regardless, still kind of fighting for position in those standings, whether it be polls, power rankings, or where you stand in your district. The season really starting to take shape, kind of starting to see who's contending, who's pretending, and everything in between. Want to thank our sponsor, Gridiron Football USA, for helping us put on the Red River Roundup, and of course, 446 Sports for helping us out here. Be sure to tune in every Saturday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. We'll cover everything that we can in the Pelican State for high school football, everything that 446 does to bring football to you, everything in this area, and then do our best to get you caught up on everything from around the state. Again, want to thank Mike McMillan, Chasten Navarez, Jace Lejeune, and Doug Gann for helping us get today's show out. Enjoy your Saturday, everyone, and we'll see you for week 4. You've been watching the Red River Roundup right here on 446 Sports.